welcome back to the It's Just Sport podcast bonus episode. Myself and Niamh promised you that we would further debate the Sha'Carri Richardson situation. If you're not too sure what it is, feel free to check out It's Just Sport paper review, last Tuesday's edition, where we go through the news and discuss kind of outward topics. We obviously said we would do a little bit more research on the situation, on the social science, I suppose, behind it, the political science, and I suppose more importantly, the actual athletic science, sports science behind it. So, Niamh, if you just want to give us a run through as to what the situation is with Sha'Carri Richardson, and let us know the facts.
Yeah, so look, Sha'Carri Richardson, the story has been everywhere at the moment. She was tipped to be one of the hot favourites for the 100 metres at the Olympic Games. She has made such an impression over the last couple of months, and I think people are really gearing up and getting excited to watch her. So Sha'Carri won the women's 100 metre at the US Olympic Track and Field Trials in June. She ran 10:86, which is the sixth fastest time in history, and was tipped to be the one to break Flo-Jo's record of 10:48. So people were getting really excited. I think the people were starting to love her. She tested positive for marijuana following the race and received a 1-month suspension by the United States anti-doping agency. Just like easier to say, USADA. Anyway, Vogue called her the Flo-Jo of our time. Loads of positive media attention for all the right reasons before that. She was set to go up against Shelly-Ann Fraser-Pryce, the 2008 and 2012 Olympic champion, Dina Asher-Smith, the world champion, and Elaine Thompson-Herah, 100 metre and 200 metre gold at Rio 2016. It was just set to be like a really, really exciting race. Like, everybody seems to be on form, and everyone was ready for them to go to head and really battle it out. So when this test came back positive, she received a ban for the use of marijuana. So she told a news station that she had used marijuana as a way to cope with the surprise death of her biological mother, which occurred while she was at Olympic trials. And I believe that she found out from media, and so she hadn't even found out. So it was a really bad way to deliver the news, obviously, and very upsetting for her. So I think definitely people sympathise with the situation, how this all seems to have occurred. She, in response to the ban, she said, "Don't judge me because I'm human. I just happen to run a little faster." So yeah, that's kind of the situation there. Marijuana is on the World Anti-Doping Agency's list of banned substances. USADA and the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee follow their rules. In 2013, WADA changed its policy from prohibiting any marijuana use at all to only banning it during competition. So this is where the kind of detail is important. So marijuana is only banned during in-competition period, which starts at 11:59 p.m. the day before the competition and ends during its conclusion. A suspension for testing positive for marijuana can be up to 2 years, and the minimum length is a month. So in terms of like the ban and that piece around like 11:59 the day before, I believe it's not possible to find out when somebody actually had taken marijuana or whatever it was, like whether you'd know if it was 48 hours before or if it happened to be like 28 days before, or whatever it might be. So like that piece around the time and date is like hard for them to establish. In terms of how long it stays in your system, it can stay in your system it's usually around 30 days, but it says as well that it can be up to 90 days. So it's something that, look, in terms of taking marijuana in whatever form, it's a kind of slippery slope for athletes that want to compete at something like the Olympic Games or some of these other competitions where these rules are in place, because you're kind of playing with fire in terms of like, can you actually establish when it leaves one individual system. WADA cites a 2011 study published in Sports Medicine as its evidence that marijuana drug enhances performance and creates a health risk as well. The health risk says that that marijuana can impair decision making and skills, so that's kind of why they're not promoting it. And then in terms of the performance enhancing, the study notes that Additional research is needed, but marijuana induces euphoria, improves self-confidence, induces relaxation, and relieves stress. So this is the performance-enhancing perspective. That obviously there is a list of drugs there from a performance-enhancing side of things, and why they're on that list of banned substances. In terms of like deeper reasons as to why it might be banned, it's illegal in a lot of countries. So we know in some states in the US it is legal, and obviously, look at the Netherlands, like other places around the world, it is legal. But in most countries around the world, or in a lot of countries around the world, there's a lot of split decision in terms of, it's not legal in lots of places, but there's also like split decision in terms of like what people's opinion of the drug are. And then also it doesn't really fit the clean cut look of the Olympics. It's not a great example for children. It doesn't really fit the sporting image. So in terms of a substance that's going to be banned, it makes sense that it is. There's a lot of conversation and like a lot of studies that have been done just generally in terms of like marijuana versus cocaine versus ecstasy versus loads of different drugs, and like how it impacts a person. Not necessarily an elite athlete, but like in terms of how it impacts someone's decision making and stuff. And then also a lot of people see it as a gateway drug to other drugs, but that's kind of, we'll say, regular people's life as opposed to maybe elite athletes and why they may or may not be using it. So yeah, I mean that's kind of the conversation. Like a lot of the facts there, the details that are there in terms of it. But it's definitely like a massive conversation at the moment. We'd love to hear everyone's like thoughts on it. As we said initially when we mentioned it, like a lot of people sympathise with her, but most people seem to believe that she should have known about it. And kind of what did she expect? She was like due to be going to the Olympic Games. Like she's competing at international level like all the time, and knows the story. And like at this stage, like, the ins and outs of competing, and like for her, like the Olympics was just right before her.
Yeah, no, definitely. I was like, oh my gosh, she's going to continue with like a cool rant about like the status of the Olympics. No, I think look, obviously for me, I think everyone at this stage probably knows my background, that I have a degree in criminology where I specialised in drug use, in society and all that kind of stuff. So this is obviously something that used to be my bread and butter up to about 3 years ago when I graduated and I decided to pursue sports. I suppose to reference everything to do with everything Niamh said, she's fully correct in everything she said. There are plenty of studies that have been done in the likes of Portugal and the Netherlands, which have basically showcased that if you legalise marijuana and all that kind of stuff, then the actual rate of use actually drops, and hospitalisations and illnesses relating to drug use actually drop as well, because the idea is that if it's legal, you're probably getting cleaner drugs as well in that moment in time. It's not creepily imported in from something else. Obviously, political context in America. Obviously at that time, Nancy Reagan in the 80s had released her No Means No campaign, and the really famous ad, I'm not too sure if you've seen it, Niamh, was running across American TV, which had an image of a frying pan, and the caption on it was, "This is what happens to your brain when you're on drugs," and it was an egg frying and sizzling away in a frying pan. So obviously from the get-go, drugs were obviously demonized. They were very much the no back in the 80s and 90s. Then obviously marijuana became a substance used, especially in Black, Latino and urban communities in America. So obviously, harsh on crime and different things like that obviously took place. So there is a massive political context when it comes to the use of marijuana. There is a massive political context when it comes to the Black community, especially using marijuana, especially because these are the community groups that make up the majority of prison society in America at the moment. And I think as well, I was really interested to hear Dick Pound, who used to be the founding member actually of WADA, which I thought was incredibly interesting. And he came out and he basically said that, yeah, for sure in the 80s and 90s when they were listing up the substances that should be banned from international competition and all that kind of stuff, that initially marijuana wasn't on the list of things because they didn't know, there wasn't enough studies done at that time, and it was actually a member of Bill Clinton's government, the Department of Drug Trafficking, actually intervened and said, listen, I think for the good of society, sport and life in general, I would prefer if this substance was on the banned use for international athletes. They are role models at the end of the day, and therefore if they see role models using drugs, they will want to use drugs as well. Obviously, the conversation has shifted in the last number of years. You've got the likes of AOC, obviously over in America, Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, and other members of parliament who are now coming out and saying that these laws are evident of the racist times that obviously we lived in the 80s and 90s in America, and all that kind of stuff. And a lot of studies now are showcasing that it doesn't do performance enhancement if done correctly, and all that kind of stuff. So for context, in other sports, last year the NFL actually loosened its marijuana rules. Testing was limited to 2 weeks of training, and the penalty for a positive result was changed from a fine to a fine, from a suspension. The NFL also formed a pain management committee and pledged $1 million to research marijuana as a treatment for pain. Major League Baseball, also in America, removed marijuana completely from its list of banned substances in 2019, and the NBA suspended random testing for marijuana for the 2020-21 season, but it remains on the banned list. The UFC no longer penalizes athletes for marijuana use unless the athlete is found to have intentionally used it to enhance performance. One breakout star who has obviously offered her support to Sha'Carri Richardson is basketball star Natasha Cloud. She came out and she said it's time to break the stigma surrounding athletes' use of marijuana. She actually has a medical card. She obviously plays at the highest level of basketball, and she uses medical marijuana for anxiety, recovery, and sleep. And she's one of the top basketball stars obviously today. So it is, from my perspective, just incredibly interesting to see, one, the conversation surrounding marijuana pop back up again. It's obviously incredibly interesting to see the societal context, considering that's what I would have been doing in college. And it's just incredible to see, for me actually, how in very few years, literally we're talking 2-3 decades, how the conversation has shifted entirely from ban her, throw her in jail, terrible, she's using marijuana, all of a sudden to people going, well, actually, maybe that's a bit harsh. Maybe it's a bit rude. And I think it is incredibly interesting that other, either children of WADA members or other people who are involved in anti-doping campaigns are basically shrugging their shoulders and saying, it's marijuana. I'd rather the anabolic steroids are, pursued more.
I think there's two sides to this. I actually think it's really interesting that most of the organizations that you have named are American, and so they appear to be a bit more open-minded, and obviously it's legal in lots of different states over in the US. So I think they're a little more open to it, maybe somewhat than other countries. And obviously we've listed a lot of these organizations are based there. And then on in terms of the piece that I find intentionally used to enhance performance.
Mm-hmm.
That's how does one measure that?
Yeah.
It's very difficult to say intentionally used, because realistically, regardless of if it's in a sporting perspective or not, anxiety, recovery, and sleep, which is obviously what Natasha Cloud is saying, improved.
Yeah.
And it does aid recovery. So I mean that's difficult. But then on the other side, you could say chamomile tea. You could take chamomile tea to, to improve their sleep and stuff. So it is it's kind of where do you draw the line? For me, from the sports side and from the Olympics side, I just don't really see it coming into play because of such mixed opinions around marijuana in general. Mm-hmm. Because if we can't even agree across globally or in a lot of nations whether it's something that we think should be legal or illegal, the Olympics isn't going to associate themselves with that. It's just not. And like we said earlier, it's a pretty clean cut game. While we know in other instances it's been riddled with drugs and performance enhancing and people are getting banned for different bits and pieces, we know that they aim to have a very kind of clean, family friendly image. Another thing I think that's important is we're talking about I know we mentioned the other day in the podcast Nurofen Plus is banned, and there are other substances that are there, that a lot of people will kind of go, oh, but it's not performance enhancing, or why is that on the list, etc., etc. But there's a lot of things there that, as we said, for us, it may not impact your kind of average person or whatever on a day-to-day basis, but when it's used in a performance enhancing situation, it's where it gets a bit complicated. I know you watched that documentary,
the Nasser one, or not the Nasser one, the Mo. Jeez, I better not say his name.
Yeah.
The doctor, what's his name? Salazar, Alberto.
Alberto Salazar. Yeah, we both watched that documentary.
Yep.
So, like, there is a bit of conversation in terms of like what is cheating and
Where's the line?
what's like going around the lines. And we know that there's look, there's been conversation in terms of other things, like people that are on inhalers that aren't meant to be on inhalers, like all this kind of thing. Like people are doing other things that are a little bit grey as well. So like it is, in terms of like anti-doping and everything, like it's a very complicated sphere to be in. One of the things that I thought was really interesting in that documentary was when it was either Salazar or one of his athletes was doing the marathon, and the hat that it was one of his athletes, and the hat that they put on that had cooling in the hat in the middle of the marathon.
Yeah.
Like, and is that smart, or like, a lot of people say
even the shoes, like even the Vaporfly shoes, like how far do you even go to say, oh my god, this shoe is illegal, because it's got a certain padding and your foot isn't pounding off the ground and you're damaging yourself. Something even as limited as limited.
Oh, like technology, like the technology debate is like certainly one thing, because there's like so much in terms of like, you're talking about shoes, we're talking about swimming talk. Obviously, we mentioned the swimming hat there recently. Like, we're saying like it actually doesn't even enhance performance, and it's still getting banned. But in terms of substances, like I think particularly like marijuana at the moment is kind of a challenging enough one, and I just don't see it being legal for another while. And like I know the other side of it is like CBD. Like, where does that come into it? Because a lot of the benefits from a performance, like for the sleep, anxiety, etc., people are associating with CBD as well. So,
well, I was going to say our interview with Chanel McCoy. She definitely answered a lot of our CBD questions in terms of, and she was basically saying that the reason why it's a very interesting interview if anyone is interested in watching it. If you get CBD derived from the plant, so you always go to like the chemist and they're like, we've CBD oil, and you see the word derived from plant, and she was basically saying that even though it's derived from the plant, there's actually still a risk of THC being in it, because you can't necessarily separate plant from the composition it's made up of, whatever, whereas her company specifically looks at the composition and then does an artificial mimication, I suppose, mimicry of the CBD, and that's why theirs is, you could say 100% pure. I don't know, obviously was she just selling us the CBD oil or no one, but I just thought even that conversation was incredibly interesting, because as you said, Niamh, it goes back to if you go into a pharmacy as an athlete, even as a normal GA athlete, like, I remember Brendan O'Sullivan of Kerry, he got banned for using a supplement that you take with water, not knowing, and he bought it in the local pharmacy. But to go back to the whole CBD thing and THC, considering that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, because THC is the band.
Is the bit that makes you stoned, yes, as everyone who watches Gogglebox would know. But no, if you are buying CBD oil and it's derived from the plant, you obviously get the effects because there is an element of THC in it. Not a whole pile, I suspect, or else it wouldn't be on the market. But going back to what you were saying, if you were to do 3 drops of those CBD oil every night before you go to bed to help you sleep, and you get tested positive for THC and marijuana in your system, you'd be like, I'm just taking a CBD oil. Do you know, like, it's
you have to be careful with that as well. Yeah, and I think that's what Chanel was saying, like in terms of the product that they have, it's synthetic to ensure that there is a THC in it, and that's the side of it. And there is like an amount of nanograms. I don't think I have the nanograms right here.
It's 150 or something like that, I think.
It's nanograms in your system. So I think, like, in terms of the conversation we were having today as well, like obviously you mentioned like Michael Phelps, so we've done a bit more research into Michael Phelps. It's 150 nanograms per milliliter of THC is what the limit is. In terms of Phelps, he had his ban between 2016 and 2020. He'd actually, so obviously we had the conversation, about Phelps, and it was in terms of a photograph that had popped up of him, with a bong in 2009. So he obviously was like the star of US swimming, the star of the Olympic Games, following 8 gold medals, everything. And he served a ban, but his ban, I believe, was 3 or 6 months.
3 months suspension, and lost his some sponsors.
Yeah, so in terms of the situation that happened there. Like, because a lot of people are comparing the situation and saying that, you know, Sha'Carri's being treated differently and how Phelps got to do whatever. But I actually think the way that this has happened is Sha'Carri was actually really unfortunate with the timing of everything, because Phelps actually got a more severe ban, but it was in like off season. Like, he actually had a ban that was 3 times as long, but his wasn't directly for the Olympics or whatever. So he actually served his ban and then he competed for the World Championships. But I think it actually is just down to timing.
Well, when he got banned, they actually 4 years later reduced that ban. In 2013, they increased the threshold that triggers the positive test, and apparently the average of athletes who tested positive annually dropped from 400 to about 130 within that space of time. And then another member of WADA said that marijuana is actually, I didn't realize this, was the 9th most flagged drug in 2019. So, you know, for a drug, you know, say, let's say the tests are 130 people annually, that's 9th on the list. I think, you know, it's just kind of a weird one, because obviously, you know, if we were going back to Alberto Salazar and all those kind of stuff, you know, you're hearing stuff about WADA being underfunded, USADA being underfunded. And then I think a lot of people were arguing, well, if you're so underfunded, why don't you lift this one that according to people, doesn't cause massive levels of issues comparing to your anabolic steroids or your salbutamol or your masking agents or all these.
It's still gonna have the test that, like, it's still the drug, like we're talking about clinical image. They just don't want it.
No, I know, but I'm just like, people are like arguing like from all angles. Like, they're just saying, if you took marijuana off the list, you've taken the 9th most flagged drug in 2019. Surely that frees up a good chunk of your resources to go chase after like these perceived bad guys.
But it opens.
It's your perception of who's the bad guys, is what I'm saying. It's that perception.
That opens the door for people doing whatever they want with specific drugs, because it might be on the list, but if they don't know what's testing for it, like, they're like, okay, cool.
No, but this was the call to remove it from the list, full stop.
Yeah, they're not gonna do it.
I don't know.
Not in the next review. I just don't think so. Like, in terms of like what we're saying, perspective, whether like performance enhancing or not, from an image perspective, still it doesn't fit the bill.
They have predicted here in the Washington Post, a guy who worked with WADA, Dick Pound, former founding member, and he said, and I quote, "The next WADA code would include a recommendation that marijuana should not be viewed as a sports-related drug. In the United States, if not the entire world, I believe attitudes have changed." That's his quote.
Yeah. I don't know. I just think, like, obviously with like some of the other organizations that are like have removed it and stuff, I just don't think
I could totally imagine.
It's gonna be another while. Like, I don't think it would be that soon. You know, it's just from the controversial opinions around the world, I think that it's going to be like a difficult one to kind of. But in terms of like the performance enhancing and stuff, like, it's like you're saying, like steroids and stuff is different, but like same as like Nurofen, like how much is your Nurofen?
No.
You have to draw a line somewhere. But look, it's certainly like a really interesting conversation, and we'd love to like get the feedback. We just put something up on Instagram.
I was gonna say, like, I would love to like sit down with like 100 athletes at random, like not knowing who they are, globally. I'm not even talking like in an Irish context, and basically say to them, you know, would you mind if someone had anabolic steroids or marijuana in their system on the starting blocks right next to you?
They're quite different.
No, but like at the end of the day, as in the point that they're making is that which would you like? Would you prefer as an athlete that they chase down these guys?
But there's a scale.
But yeah, I know there's a scale, but I think it just goes back to the whole. Like, I think we'd be really surprised with the answers, to be really honest with you. Like, I do think a lot of attitudes...
I don't think you can compare them. Do you know what I mean? Because that's like, then you open the door to a lot of those drugs. And somebody, if you say, in terms of like Nurofen Plus, people are going to be like, oh, well, yeah, that's fine.
Are WADA not comparing them by having them on the list?
But it's not about...
Both are banned?
Yeah, no, they are both banned, but it's like a slippery scale. Like, there are drugs, like you're saying, like steroids, and then there's other drugs that are not as performance enhancing. But it doesn't mean that they aren't enhancing performance. It's just
No, I know
It
what you're
should be
saying.
on it.
It's a percentage. It's a
Like
percentage.
think of
game.
your penalty points, right? You get like 1 penalty point for some things, you get 3 penalty points for speeding, you get penalty points and fines for doing other things. Do you know what I mean? It's a scale, and like to be fair, the bans are delivered usually, not all the time, in respect to like the severity of the offence. Like it's more than Law and Order kind of situation. Like it's kind of like, well, did you like depending on if you like robbed a shop or I don't know, something more severe.
Well, we could sit here and like compare like bloody murder with robbing a shop.
But that's
We can do
but you're
that.
still gonna. But my point is, you still get punished.
Yeah,
So,
but I think what people are asking for is that with the amount of attitudes and stuff shifting with marijuana and people undertaking studies to see if it is performance enhancing, people are just asking the question, is it a worthwhile drug to hunt down when you have people, I'm not saying who, but when you have people at the starting block next to you and you know full well they're not clean. And I'm basically asking the question, would you rather take off that drug to get those guys? It's a perception of who do you think is bad. That's all dependent on the answer,
No, I look from that perspective. Like I do get what you're saying, and it's very difficult. Like people are very very smart in terms of their drug use. Like we know that from documentaries that we've seen, like the Tour de France and cycling, and everybody knows that there's a lot of stuff goes on. Whether people say it's cleaner, but it's not clean. So there's a lot of very smooth operators that will have their athletes ready to rock, and you may never catch them because
I think Icarus, the documentary, did showcase that.
Exactly. But I have some like feedback. So we put up a post there, and then we actually put up a feedback box. Question. So we literally just put it out there, and we said Sha'Carri Richardson has been ruled out of Olympic action after she tested positive for marijuana, which will leave her with a 36-day suspension. Do you think the ruling on marijuana testing should be revised, or was this the correct call? So first, there's a response here. Hell no, she should be competing. Somebody else, she knew the rules and she chose to break them. Deserved. Somebody else, let her compete. Somebody else said the ruling was revised already in the past year. Up until then, it would have been a ban of up to 4 years. Crazy stuff. Loads of athletes have been victim to this, but good to see people talking about it now. The timing of the ban is awful. And I think that's what we're saying, in relation to it. It's only a 30-day ban. It's not as if it's a career-ending ban.
In the grand scheme of things, it just happened at the wrong 30-day point. If this happened in 30 days in April, you'd have been like, oh, cool, she's still going to the Olympics.
And I know that they were talking about trying to include her in the relay, and from what I saw recently,
she's out.
She won't be in the relay. But they were looking at that to see what the decision would be there. Somebody said, similar to someone using an inhaler too much or taking painkillers, it's your job to know what's banned. Somebody else, she doesn't deserve to miss out on the Olympics for that. She's right, she's only human. A lot of people waste a savage talent, which is,
That's the other thing that I find so funny about Irish responses to anything. It's like, oh, it's a waste of talent, isn't it, at the end of the day? It's such a specific Irish response. I'm not dissing it. I think it's just it's really
No, I think
I get what they're saying, for sure.
This one I think sums it up. It says irresponsible but still heartbreaking. So I think people really were looking forward to having her in it.
I think overall that could be the generic or the most general response, because I think it is the most applicable. I would feel the same way. I would say yes, for sure it's irresponsible. Yes, you do know the rules. But I think at the end of the day, if we are all to agree as a society that rules are rules and rules need to be obeyed, from a pure societal context, we wouldn't have gotten very far. I remember when Serena Williams got Naomi Osaka beat her in the Australian Open because the umpire said she kept cheating. And basically there was a really good article that basically was rules are rules, but are rules okay? Are these rules fine? And I think that's what a lot of people are just currently asking at the moment about the marijuana use with WADA. Yes, it's a rule. I think everyone accepts that. And yes, everyone accepts she did break the rules. I think what people are just asking is this just a rule that's just outdated and needs to be revised ASAP? I think that's the main question. I'm just disappointed as everyone else that she won't be participating. Yes, I'm sad she broke the rules, but I
Yeah.
am also in the camp where I'm like, maybe this isn't a rule that shouldn't be a rule.
Yeah, I think people can really sympathize with the situation, and like it is totally understandable. And I think the way that the news was delivered and everything is like was not on. But it's so hard to see them being like, yeah, grand, we'll just let her compete, because it's like an
No.
extenuating circumstances kind of thing. It is extenuating circumstances, but then everybody's going to be coming to you with extenuating circumstances. So it
And
is
everyone's going
unfortunately
to
real.
have a mother dying and being told by the press, and it's all going to be traumatic and sad. Do you know, like, I'm not saying
Like
that's
they're
her
not,
excuse, but you
they're
know,
not, but there will be other, they will come forward with other
like athletes
stories,
will come
and
up
like
with excuses. Yeah.
everything is there will be other extenuating circumstances. I mean, like they're elite sport, like, you know, there will be different reasons that things don't go to plan, but I just they're not going to take that into consideration. It's just not part of the game. A lot of people are saying that the 30-day ban is actually quite lenient, like given that that it was up to 4 years before, and also that
That's been revised a long time though. Like, I mean, that's been revised since the last 6, 8 years. Do you know, like if that rule came in last year,
it's
we'd
the
all be saying,
minimum.
Jesus,
But
she's lucky.
in terms of the situation, like we know that Phelps was 3 months, and like what they're saying is like, and that was like during off season, so it was actually like he wasn't even like racing at the time.
So does that not mean
Like
his
as in,
ban was better? I know it was longer, but in the scheme of things, is it not better? Because
yeah,
he
but
was
she
doing
got
nothing anyway.
caught like at competition. Like the
But
rules have
like
changed
when
since,
he
like,
was getting
but like the
tested,
rules have changed to actually at competition. It's not
yeah,
like
yeah,
when you
yeah.
get randomly drug tested. So like she knew, but like I'm sorry, realistically, taking out of account the fact that like the extenuating circumstances and obviously the grief that she's going through, she was at Olympic trials. She was like hoping to be selected to go and race the US in Tokyo at the Olympic Games, and she made the decision to smoke marijuana, knowing it's a banned substance. If she had any belief in herself that she was going to win the trials, she's the first person they're going to test. They don't care about who came fifth and sixth. They're only going to be worried about. And like the other like reality of the situation is, our US anti-doping agency, are they going to pull her? Like, are they going to pull her at their trials, or are they going to wait until she goes to compete at the Olympic Games and then she tests positive for something, and then they actually have taken, so she goes, she possibly ends up on the podium, she's done well, everyone's like thrilled, and then she gets done for doping. And then the US are kind of like, oh shit, we actually, like, they would have tested her, they would have known that like she had, they have the results, then they send her knowing the results that they have, risking the fact they're putting an athlete forward, knowing that she's going to have broken the rules and going to get pulled there. So you have to pull her, because then you're taking like the risk out of the situation and put somebody else in. So like you put in the athlete that hasn't been tested positive and is clean, and allow them to go and race and potentially end up in a final or on a podium or something. Because it's actually knowing that she's going to do well is one thing, and like hoping that she's on the podium and everything. But once she gets there, she's going to be pulled. So you're actually just wasting. Like if you can send a max of 3 sprinters or whatever, it's 2 or 3 sprinters, you send them. And then you know that she might podium or get to the final, and then she's going to be put. Sure, it's a waste to send them somebody, because it's against the rules, simple as. From a monetary perspective and everything, so they're going to go, it's a waste to send her from a financial perspective, no matter what the situation might be. They're also saving themselves the embarrassment, because they don't want it. Nobody, like no nation wants to be associated. So while people are sympathizing and empathizing and everything now, no country wants the story of, we sent an athlete and they were doping. People freak. All of any country that has at an Olympic Games any association with doping or anything, all the countries go, oh, like everybody's looking at you. It's the biggest stage for a lot of these sports. So it's not like she was either going to be, they either turn a blind eye to it at their own trials and let her go, knowing she's going to get caught in 30 days. Like it's not.
Or if you're Russia, you fully believe everyone's doing it. Why can't
Oh
we
yeah,
do it?
yeah, but like no, I mean in terms of Russia, like don't get me wrong, like
No,
that's
but I mean, they're looking at the UK and America and all the others, and they're like, sure, they're doing it. You don't care about them. You only care about us. So that's what I mean. You
It's
could go
like,
full blown
in terms
conspiracy
of
theory
like,
too about it.
in terms of political powers and the decisions and everything, like that's like, that is it, that it goes deeper. Because look, in terms of the fact, like, the entire nation of Russia was meant to be banned for 2016, and then suddenly like 200 and something athletes were competing, which is bigger than most nations' entire team. So like, and you had the likes of Yulia Efimova competing at it, who has been like, she's served at least 2 doping bans, and you have other people. There are other American athletes that have been done for doping that are still competing. You have Chinese, like, you have loads and loads of different people, but like, they knew a sure thing. She gets tested, she gets done. So take it out in your Olympic trials, you mitigate the risk, and you send somebody that's clean. And I'm not saying from a performance enhancing perspective, as you said, it's not steroids, but the rules are the rules. They know that she's going to get banned for it. So to be fair, from the US perspective, like all the athletes that she beats, they're going to be complaining. The athletes that don't get to go because she gets to go having broken the rule. So, like, in terms of like the severity, it's a bad timing, very bad timing. However, it's the like most lenient ban she could have got. The minimum is 30 days. So that's what she was served. I do sympathize with the girl. She's only 21 years old. It's clearly been a very difficult time for her, but she does know the rules. So she wanted to go and fulfill her dream of competing at the Olympic Games. She knows that she is the person that they're looking at. Like, she is, like, if they're talking about her in the same realms of like, she's the next Flo-Jo, and like, she knows she's in everybody's eyes, and she really not, and it got taken away. Will we see her in Paris? Yeah, I think so.
No, I totally
think so. Come back and be world champ next year, and like, yeah, and like, thank God she's 21, you know, because like, she has so much more time to compete. And to be fair, she has accepted it. She said she's only human, and you know, she understands it was a mistake, and a lot of people, like, she has admitted it's a mistake, and a lot of people, I think, appreciate her for saying that, and like, I don't think she's like really kicking up a fuss. Everybody else is, but she's been pretty low key about it. Like, she knows it was a thing. Like,
she can't say much though. Like, she can't say much, because whatever she says, if she goes full 90 and says, I totally believe this should be on WADA's list, all of a sudden she looks like the biggest drug user in America. Look, and if she goes the other way, people would be like, oh, she's turning her back on millions of communities who have been done for this drug and are in prison, and now they basically, like, were relying on her to be like the hope of the nation, and now look, she's turned her back on the entire lot of them. So she couldn't really do much either way.
Yeah, but look, I think in terms of the performance enhancing side of things, like, and whether we'll see marijuana being like one of the substances that becomes unbanned, and maybe we will. Okay, like, maybe in, like, I don't think it'll be soon. Maybe down the line it will, and more like science and stuff. Again, I have this just the clean image that the Olympics like to associate with themselves.
Well, I mean, considering like the main, like, they do like listed like as, it's like, yes, it impairs your performance, that's fine, but then they say it also endangers the spirit of the sport. So the Olympics are on your side with that one. Like, that they're fully in agreement.
So that's what I'm saying. I'm not really on his side, like, personally. I'm just saying, I don't see the two. From a brand and marketing perspective, I do not see the Olympics and marijuana going together particularly well. That's all.
Neither do I, but I do think maybe not this, like the 2024 Olympics, but I do think 2028, I do think there will, I genuinely do think it's going to go, because I think with the likes of CBD oil and everything, like, reaching the market and becoming so mainstream.
Like, CBD obviously is like
it's different.
The conversation a bit, and it, like, can it be used instead? You know what I mean? Is there
they've dropped, what is it, cannabinoids off their list entirely, which is like a I can't even say the word. It's basically like, it's not cannabis completely. It's like one of the other supplements in it. But like, the point that I'm basically making is that I think with it being so legally available in USA, Netherlands, Portugal, and other countries, or decriminalized even, I should say, in Portugal, just in case people think they can like flock to Portugal and they'll get a load of it. That's not what I'm saying. It's just decriminalized. I think the conversation is shifting, and I think it is slowly moving on. And I genuinely do think that it eventually will be dropped off the list. And I think this will be all a crazy story. We'll all be like, damn, that was wild.
But I think in terms of what you're saying, like, I do get it in terms of like the performance enhancing side of things and everything. But like, I go back to Nurofen Plus. Like near you would take Nurofen Plus without thinking about it,
Nope,
but it's
I
on the
agree.
list. Do you know what I mean? So it's got like there's a line there. You know, look, people have been banned for other, you know, things, and people they'd be deemed less.
Yeah, just for anybody in terms of the podcast that we did the other day, that people might not have heard was about Ryan Lochte, and like a lot of people. So what basically happened with Lochte was he took a photograph of himself with IV, and it said in the IV that it was vitamins and whatever. And basically on the rules is that you're not allowed, use IV unless it's like literally by a doctor. It's like a kind of an emergency situation or whatever. But he did that and put it on Instagram or whatever social media, got caught for it and was banned. And a lot of people look at that and they're kind of like, oh, okay, well, if he wasn't doping, it's just an IV, and like how much of a benefit can that be, etc., etc. But it's something again that like people are open to like understanding and like sympathize with, but it's still the rules are the rules. And like there was a 14-month ban he served for that, you know.
But I think even like as some guy even said in WADA, like that every 4 years anti-doping pops up for the cycle of the Olympics, and we all forget it. We all move on with our lives. He wasn't like dissing it, but he was just like saying in general. But he was like, you know, you have to understand that in between those 4 years, like what's going on are not pretty pictures. You know, like it's ugly work. It's not fun.
But like doping goes on. Like doping goes, like testing goes on all the time.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is like it goes out of the public mind after the Olympics every 4 years.
Yeah, I guess it's a particular community that are still in tune with it, because like you will see different athletes that are done for doping. Is it maybe as big news? Like it's bigger news when it's just before the Olympic Games and stuff, but like it is still happening, and there have been other athletes that have served bans and stuff like between Olympic cycles, but like people still do miss out on competition for different things that they've done. But yeah, I guess just like the point with Lochte is just that he like people are open-minded to that. He served his ban. It was like 14 times more severe than Sha'Carri Richardson's was. It just so happened that hers was literally impact her going to the Olympics or not. But yeah, I don't know. I think that's kind of where we are. Like, I have TikTok here as well. And people are disappointed they can't hear the other side, which we will try and figure out for the next time.
Sorry,
but yeah, people are saying it's like a really interesting conversation. And to anybody that was listening on TikTok, we will have this published in the next couple of days, and you can hear Joanne as well. It's really interesting conversation. Like obviously we may even check in terms of the paper review next week and tell people a little bit more about what the feedback is, because we've had a lot of people like weigh in on it, and especially the post has just gone up now, and so it's really interesting. But I think also we're going to talk about some other stuff. So obviously we have covered Laurel Hubbard and the fact that she'll be competing in the Olympics as the first transgender woman. We've covered that a bit, and now the conversation is starting around two athletes that have been banned from natural high levels of testosterone, and a lot of people are familiar with the Caster Semenya story, and there's two other athletes that have been named a couple of times as well that have been impacted by that. And in terms of like, we've obviously explored like the transgender athlete competing side of things a lot, but it'd be really interesting to talk about kind of the full picture. And look, we'll wrap it up there. Thanks a million for taking the time to chat. I think it was a really interesting conversation. I'm looking forward to hearing what everybody else has to say.
Glad my parents funding a 4-year degree actually got to know. Thanks, Anne and Joe, for the extra education about drug use in society and overall. I really do appreciate it.
Deadly.